Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of the Elire Strategy Summit. We're excited to host you all for another great day of sessions. This is the Maximizing the Value of Project Management Office presented by Robert Harrell. My name is Katie Bolt, and I'm the Business Development Associate here at Elire. I'm one of the moderators you will hear throughout the sessions today. Before we get into today's presentation, I have a couple housekeeping items I want to cover. Everyone has been placed on mute for the duration of the presentation. There will be 2 poll questions throughout the presentation. We would love for your participation. If time allows at the end, we will have a live Q&A, and there's a Q&A portal at the bottom of your screen. Please submit all questions in there throughout the presentation. Reminder, this session is eligible for 1 PDU credit hour. Certificates will be sent out upon request after the event. If you were unable to join us yesterday, all session recordings will be sent out next week. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our presenter, Robert.
Thank you, Katie. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay, and I've successfully unmuted. Thank you for joining today. We're excited about going through this process with you and helping share some of the lessons learned that we've had over the many years of consulting experience that we share at Elire, and providing that with some background and some good examples of how we can continue to maximize the value of a project management office. In terms of the agenda today, we'll do a quick brief introduction. Many of y'all know who Elire is and what we do in terms of consulting and bringing value to all of our clients. I'll also give a little brief introduction of my background. Then we're going to go through what we have defined as kind of the purpose of an internal project management office. What are the different aspects that can be implemented at either a service organization like Elire or a regular organization, whether it be in any industry that has continuing projects of any size. We're going to look at the true functions of a project management, what's the breakdown of all the individual pieces so that you can selectively adopt what is right for your organization, and look at how that translates into the value that is derived from that project management office. There's a couple of different models in implementing this process, and we're going to go through those in detail to help give you a flavor of just the different maturation process or the different levels of engagement you can have throughout an implementation of a PMO. And then finally, talk about how to elevate any existing PMOs with the strategic partnership for the business, as well as using new tools and techniques that come available to us throughout the process. So with that being said, a little bit about Elire. We were established in 2005 and we celebrated 15 years of business. We currently are with a number of different clients, continuing to succeed by providing and partnering with them to effectively implement, integrate, and optimize in upgrades or their software investments. We really try to do this by providing not only strategic guidance, but also with best practice and core business process improvement to really unlock the software's true potential and gain the most from that investment. We have a deep commitment to excellence, as you all know, and quality is one of our core values. A number of different things that we like to call out, not only of our many clients, Fortune 500, but across all industry groups. We really want to try and focus on many different aspects, whether it be our management services, managing advisory services with application roadmaps, process improvement, end user adoption, data analytics, and of course, project management. And that's what we'll be focusing on today's session. My name is Robert Harrell. I'm a project manager and a long-term employee of Elire. We've been doing multiple engagements year over year. We just finished up a multinational rollout and fluid deployment on the Oracle PeopleSoft framework, and going and trying to highlight additional success and value as people continue to roll out additional functionality through what PeopleSoft and Oracle calls PUM releases, things of that nature. I've been leading these projects for the last 4 years with Elire, but have been involved with PeopleSoft implementation since 1996 on version 7.5. So I focus a lot on PeopleSoft itself. However, the core values of any PMO transfer across all applications. Thinking is application agnostic. And as we go through, we'll talk about how we've seen these tried and true methods that we can find through either the PMI or through many of the different training mechanisms for project management, how that equates to not only PeopleSoft projects, not only large-scale ERP implementations, but also regular implementations of a small software that fits a niche need inside your organizations. So it branches all levels and all scales of an implementation scope. So what are we defining as the purpose of a project management office? The project management office is a group or department within an enterprise that defines and maintains standards for project management within the organization. The PMO should strive to standardize and introduce economies of repetition and execution on projects. The PMO is a source of documentation and guidance. Now, what that really means is some organizations might not have an established PMO. And with that being said, they're looking to try and manage multiple different engagements across maybe an IT group, maybe a business process, maybe a reorganization, all the different types of implementations that can happen out there. How do you group those different projects together and try to find consistency in a number of different things? One way is to implement a common methodology of let's go through a planning, a design, a build, or a reorg, or a testing phase to then do our deployment with training and change management, things like that. You want to standardize your terminology throughout the organization so you can always be playing on a level playing field to make sure that a CEO or a CIO or CFO understands the mechanisms that are going on with the projects that may impact their areas, but may be run or led out of another area, such as an ERP upgrade. You want to introduce effective, repeatable project management processes, things like status reports, and all these different toolkits we'll go through in just a second. And through that, you're providing a common group of supporting tools that you can effectively train people on to have that be repetitive and to ensure that you're gaining that level of success across all your projects, not only if they're the multi-million-dollar projects, they might be smaller-based projects that can still leverage some of these tools to continue to provide a better value and a more clear picture throughout all of the projects that are going on in your organization. Ultimately, the objective is to improve levels of project success, and it can be established with a phased approach so that if you currently have a PMO, you may want to take a look at what level on the maturation process that is and say, how can we take this forward? And likewise, if you're joining us today without a fully developed PMO group in your organization, you can say, well, how can we get things kicked off without having to say it's a monumental task of creating a whole department or a whole organization around those types of activities? We'll break down the different levels and how you can selectively adopt or identify where you're currently at in your process to say, how can you do incremental approval or transformational approval or additional improvements across the structure of your internal project management group. So with that, we're going to start off with a quick poll question. Katie?
Thank you, Robert. The first poll question is going to be, how often do you work with the PMO group at your organization? Always, rarely, never, or not sure. We'll give about 20 seconds to answer. And I'm going to close it out here in about 5 seconds. Votes are still rolling in. So it looks like the top two answers are always and rarely.
Yep, thank you, Katie. And that makes sense because if you're joining us today, you want to learn a little bit more about some of the things that we've seen. We're a service-based organization, so while we bring methodology to the table at each and every one of our projects, we work with all different kinds of clients in all different industries. Some have very well-established PMO groups that we need to commingle with and agree upon deliverables, things of that nature. We're going to talk about that in how you can implement different types of PMO groups and how you can interrelate a service organization to your internal work, or like we said, or like some of the respondents said, rarely, how can you start to use some of these tools and techniques, or take a look at providing a whole new initiative about aligning your internal practices around a fully fledged PMO group. So thank you for the feedback. Really appreciate that. That helps us kind of guide our discussion going forward. So let's talk about some of the true functions of the project management office. One is to establish and monitor project management standards across the organization. The biggest advantage to doing this is to making sure everybody's playing on the same level field. Whether you're doing a massive ERP implementation or a large-scale reorganization throughout your company, or whatever it may be, down to the smallest, hey, we're just implementing a certain niche application for the accounts payable department, or we're putting in a new niche application for budgeting. Things like that can still follow in the same footprint if you're establishing these standards across the organization. And that only will help everyone understand what the expectations are and what are the benefits of providing all of that structure to making their projects more successful. Internal project management, especially at a non-service-based organization through any industry, is important, and it can take many different shapes. It can be individual project managers that are assigned to individual projects, and a lot of times we see individual project managers assigned to many different internal projects. One of the things we're going to hit on a little bit later is how we deal with the coordination of projects and resources from an internal standpoint, as well as assisting from our service-based structure. We're also going to take a look at increased effectiveness and efficiency for projects and project governance. So everyone has been a part of some type of project going on at your organization, whether it's been a very successful project and it's clicked on all cylinders and it just went so smoothly that you didn't have a lot of issues. And all of us have probably been involved with some of those that didn't run as smoothly and missed some timelines. And one of the things that we learn after 25 years in the industry of supporting major projects are some of these tools and techniques that we'll be showing that you might already be using. And then we can also say, well, here are some other things to think about down the road. And that's one of the things that is important about project management coaching and training and providing the PMO structure around that, is to get that continual feedback loop from the individual staff members who might be the project managers, or including the training across the organization, so that they understand how to interact when a project comes their way. Say a buyer in the purchasing department or a staff member in HR, how do they interact with a project? Well, some of the tools and techniques that a PMO can provide are entry-level discussions about this is what a project's scope is, this is what a project's charter is, things of that nature. So we'll discuss a couple of these in greater detail in the next couple of slides. So a lot of the things around establishing and monitoring the management standards across the organization is really getting that upfront work done. We talk about three different things here: pre-mobilization tools. What do you need to prepare the organization, to prepare the project management office itself, or even individual PMOs if you don't have a fully developed project management office. One of the things we like to use is a project charter. And I hope everybody was able to join Michael Merrill's discussion yesterday on diving down into all these details. But a project charter is meant to really establish the scope and clearly give that elevator speech, if you will, the understanding of what the guiding principles are, what the main players throughout the organization who will be interacting with this process, maybe the impacts, the timelines, all rolled up into one quick and easily understood project charter, and that you can always rely back on. One of the things that we see is if we work hard on our project charter up front and get it really complete, and so it will resonate with everybody on the project, is that once we get into something like a detailed design or a redesign of a major process. If we start going down different rabbit holes, we can always kind of go back and say, remember, we always agreed to these 5 guiding principles, because honestly, there can be a lot of competing requirements out there. There can be competing requirements for time and resources. There can also be competing requirements around customizations or lack of customizations and trying to reduce upgrade costs or minimize additional services that are needed if the design starts to exceed the scope of the project charter. So the project charter is a very important pre-mobilization tool that helps keep everybody on path. The communication strategy and structure is clearly important to that as well. If you're providing that communication upfront to all the members, or as many members as you have in what we call sometimes core teams, and then reaching out to the broader teams or maybe the additional impacted areas on a pre-planned basis, will provide a lot of that upfront information so that people can start expecting what is going to happen and understand the expectations they have of themselves or that's going to be placed on them. So providing that pre-mobilization packet, there's 15, 20 other things that you can do, but we've always called out these 2 as our major items. And some of the times what a PMO can help assist with ensuring that it's done on a standardized and understood basis is to start helping with that project charter and communication strategy. So within the first week or 2, we want to talk about mobilization tools. A PMO can help provide a number of different things, whether it's helping to round out a detailed project plan, whether that's in Microsoft Project or a detailed action item list that needs to get started. Not everyone is as trained or has 50 different project plans under their belt. So what are some of the ways that you can group tasks and make sure that you've gotten to the right level of detail? Well, if you have a number of different project managers out there, they might not all have the same standard, and they might miss certain phases of, say, your methodology. And it's always good to have a project management office in place or some type of oversight so that you can make all of these plans consistent and adhering to your guiding principles within your project management office. Michael talked a lot about a RACI yesterday, which what we call our responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed resource group. A lot of times, if you don't set this up front, you might get into meetings and not have the right resources on point to say, answer a specific technical question or answer a detailed business question, or in the case of accountable or possibly responsible, being able to make that decision during those meetings to be able to move forward in a efficient basis where you're not having meeting after meeting after meeting to finally get that approval or at least a direction on some of the hard choices that might have to be made during a project. So it's always important to get that established and understood, and then following back up to the communication strategy, communicated out to everybody in the organization. It really sets the project on a firm foundation so that you can go forward and execute based on all your standards. Well, talking about what PMO can bring to some of the execution tools. Now, we all have, basic things like note-taking, providing meeting minutes, action items, things like that. But what we also see when we put in a PMO or we start to assist a client that doesn't have a structured PMO is providing something called a GRIPPY, which Michael referred to yesterday in great detail, but is a lead into each one of your meetings that talks about what is the goal of that meeting. Who are the responsible parties? What is going to be done? Who should be invited to those meetings to make sure that you have that right collection of responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And then also the process or what's going to take place in that meeting so that you can then talk about the interpersonal skills or how you want to relate. You want to have an open environment for communication. You want to be able to have a parking lot. Some of those type of tools and techniques that you can put in play to manage the execution of each and every meeting goes a long ways in terms of trying to keep everything on track and to keep everything in a focused approach that can always lead back to your project charter and some of your guiding principles. What we've done in the past is create, under our execution tools, a grippy that would also have a key slide that says, hey, here's a reminder of what our guiding principles are, or a reminder of the key scope items that are pertaining to that meeting specifically. So there's always a way to take a piece of the project charter and put it into the grippy or status templates or anything that flows through to help keep everybody on point and on task. We also have what we call a RAID log, which would be risks, action items, issues, and decisions. One of the biggest things that we see on projects, even within a large-scale ERP implementation, is that when we don't capture risks, they usually turn into a lot of more issues that create bigger obstacles for us to overcome during the project. So clearly identifying that up front and having a mitigation strategy for those risks is key. And we have to follow that throughout the project. It's not like you can just say you have a risk at the very beginning and forget about it, but having that in one log or template to where you can consolidate your risks, any mitigation steps in your action items, tracking any issues that come up from taking those actions, or the key decisions that are absolutely imperative to identify and communicate. By putting those decisions in single documents so that then you can use your communication strategy and plan to get that information back out, you're taking each one of the individual meetings that you have and then being able to keep everybody in step with and understand what may be the impacts from some of those changes. Is it an organizational change? Is it a change that requires change management and training and more communication to end users? Is it a change in strategy that might change supplier relations, things of that nature? Keeping a RAID log keeps all of that in one place. And that's also something that a PMO can help through their health checks that we'll talk later, ensuring that they're accurate, up to date, and granular enough to be effective. Because we oftentimes see if we only keep a little bit of information in there, oftentimes it's not enough. It doesn't make as big an impact. Conversely, if you have too much detail in there, you can quickly become a little bit of analysis paralysis. And there's certainly a good happy medium there that a PMO oversight group can help each and every one of the project managers and all the different participants in their projects as each one of those progress. So as we said earlier in the meeting details, and Katie referred to the Q&A, as we're going through this, if you have some questions that pop into your mind, don't forget to go down and almost feel like I'm doing a YouTube video. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe. Hit that QA button and start feeding in some of those questions so that we can have a good Q&A session at the end of all these slides. So let's talk about the strategic project management portion and how a PMO can help assist that. Aligning your projects to the strategic plan of your organization and measuring success and progress. There's many times where we assist in a client's implementation that there might be competing requirements and competing timelines, and aligning those and really putting into the communications plan the right way to communicate not only to the members of the team, but also up the leadership chain of command is imperative to making sure that once that strategic plan is put in place, that you can continually follow up with communication, with statuses, and also keeping that same type of focus through the strategic plan that you would have on the detailed project plan of an individual project. If we see that we walk into a situation where some of those competing projects really are hitting head on and having a lot of issues, maybe it's with resource contention, things like that, that's where we put in place that structure of communication to ensure that at least the visibility is there. We're not always going to be able to solve all those issues. We're not always going to be able to realign full strategic plans to coalesce with any individual project. But being able to align them as best they can and then provide that visibility along the way is really something that all project managers hope to do, but a PMO can help provide that visibility across all the projects in the organization. The prioritizing of efforts can create an internal roadmap for the next 1 to 3 years, where as you go through that strategic vision, PMOs can give that good and precise feedback to say, hey, the plan says that we need to do these 15 different strategic initiatives. However, with our resources and with our current load that we're balancing now, we will have challenges with that approach unless you do two things. You got to move one of the levers, whether it's timelines, whether it's people, or whether it's cost. So that type of feedback from a project management office with the lessons learned through the internal organization's history and previous histories at other clients or other job opportunities will help provide that information going into the plan so that you can help to push out certain priorities or pull in additional priorities that may take a better, provide a bigger bang for the buck. So we'll go to 3, ensure each project has a steering committee that represents all impacted areas. And this is something that we have seen as a challenge in a number of different scenarios. If we have an IT-led project that only focuses on IT priorities or only on IT strategic alignment, that can really have some impacts on the business and the expectation of the time and effort that is associated with some of the business activities, whether it's in time during design or whether it's time during testing and user acceptance and things of that nature. So ensuring that a steering committee is representative of all the impacted areas is key. And really to get that buy-in, a lot of time it helps to have a project management office to help shepherd even leadership through that and why it really behooves each one of those members to at least be available for quarterly, if not monthly steering committees to ensure that the alignment of that strategic roadmap and priorities are staying in focus. We have on here conduct quarterly or semi-annual reviews with business and IT leadership to ensure targets are not changing. That's that continuous feedback loop that we talk. A PMO can be the go-between between all the different project details, the timelines, the resource issues, and things like that, and be able to summarize those across all the different projects to provide business and IT leadership a common thread. And this also goes back to where we're talking about the importance of common terminology and common toolkits and methodology, so that as you go through a complex project layout, maybe you have 50 different projects you're reporting on, maybe you have 20 different projects. Regardless of the size, you still need to be able to effectively communicate that to leadership. And by having quarterly or semi-annual reviews of the strategic plan, you can then tie back to all of your individual metrics or tools that you've put in place so that leadership starts to get a clearer picture across all the different projects, what is working, what's not working, where some contingency might lay, so that you can start to react and set a mitigation plan for any risk that's coming up to possibly one or many different projects at one time. Another step that we can take a look at is providing feedback on past projects to review lessons learned for future planning. What we've seen a lot of times, and even in our own experience, sometimes we're so busy going from project to project, it's not that we don't have a lot of time to just sit back and think about, what we did right and what we could have done better. So we always go from one project to another, and how do we capture that? Well, a PMO helps give some focus and, of course, some standard templates for a project manager or individuals throughout the organization to provide feedback. Maybe it's business saying, hey, we weren't given enough lead time on setting up all these design sessions, or we weren't given enough of an understanding of the time commitment from some of our resources during a testing phase. Well, that type of feedback can continually be pulled in and aggregated at a project management office level to then help provide training back down the ladder through the project managers and even the core team members, but also up through leadership to help them understand some of the challenges the organization faces especially when it's project after project after project after project, and the constant burn of all those projects and potentially resources needs to be understood. So providing that feedback loop and setting that in a structured format for a PMO is key. Just a quick time check, about halfway through. So coordination of projects and resources, this is one of the biggest reasons I've seen PMOs create their value just in this one slide. If it wasn't just for setting the tools, templates, methodology, it might be this as well. When you have those 50 different projects going across the organization, especially even larger projects that may take a majority of resources, but you still have other projects you need to do, balancing the project commitments with the day-to-day operations. What is the main mechanism for that? Is it just the staff member saying, hey, I had to spend 8 hours or 12 hours on a production support issue today, so I didn't get to that task that I had to do for my project? Or is it the project manager saying, okay, well, I understand somebody had to have a leave based on some issues. Maybe COVID's acting up with disturbing project timelines, which it has throughout all of the last year. Different things like that, to be able to balance those and provide an oversight, especially where there's multiple projects involved. That's really where a project management office can continue to shine. By establishing clear estimates up front and the availabilities of opportunity of the operations teams, that means you can at least have a baseline for understanding where you start. And then as the projects go, the timelines and understanding of how those resource expectations ebb and flow through a project, which they always do, it gives a lot of more information to the project managers and then across the board to everyone within the organization of how to balance that month-to-month expectation, as well as tying in year-end and month-end expectations, especially where it hits accounts payable and maybe your ledgers, your general ledger resources, things of that nature. So providing that constant feedback loop through all the projects really provides a clear and actionable view of everything in your organization. And that's where a PMO really begins to shine versus just trying to adapt to a specific project management by project management task. So project management, support, and training. What are the different mechanisms during a PMO or you can set up through a PMO to help consistently deliver on all the projects in your organization? Just jumped right down into develop a training program for all new project managers brought on board. Each and every client has a different methodology. It might just be a tweak here or there, or they might have a tool set that's just a little bit different, but providing that update to an experienced project manager that's coming on board, or maybe a new project manager that's going to be taking on some of the lower, smaller base projects that can start to learn more about project management. Having that develop training initiative up front will only assist and make things a lot smoother. And then conversely, will make the projects go smoother because you better trained your resources. We also have creating a training program for all existing project managers to emphasize continued learning. We're all out there doing the projects, completing them as fast as possible, trying to be on time and under budget or on budget. But how do we take advantage of new tools? We're going to go through a couple of the new tool sets that we've been using at Elire here in a couple of more slides, but really looking at that internally, looking at different things that for training, like listening to this video, or looking for different areas to continually improve the knowledge you're providing to your project managers is really where a PMO can also do some of the legwork and then provide that information in a much more manageable way than having your project managers all on their own trying to identify new ways that they can learn. It also provides consistency around how you want to implement projects in the future. So all of that is key. And of course, identifying areas where internal project managers need additional support and published training. So there's that continual feedback loop of assessing lessons learned, assessing the current status of any implementation, and if something looks like it needs to have some assistance, say a project is falling behind, say, well, let's start to dive into how that is falling behind? Is it a resource contention? So let's look at some of the tools that we have in our arsenal to help you better understand your individual project's need, so that we can train you while you're going through that process, and maybe even provide some oversight assistance on a more interactive level for that time that project may be in the red, so to speak. So a number of different things that come into play from project management best practices and thought leadership is to continually educate your project managers on the industry best practices, if it's specific to your industry or specific to a type of project that you're implementing. Hot topics that come up, maybe key pain points that you continually hear throughout your organization, trends and new tech that we'll be going through a little bit later. But all of those type of things, if you have a PMO put in place that just allows your project managers to do the job and to accept the training and to coalesce under one umbrella, the idea of how you want to have your projects run going forward just creates that consistency and improves quality throughout. All right, now we're up to our poll question number 2, Katie.
Thank you, Robert. The last poll question is going to be, of these 4 functions, what do you utilize, or what do you currently utilize a PMO for? And you can select all that apply. So establishing PM standards and templates, strategic coordination, resource coordination, and training initiatives. I'll give about 20 seconds to answer. I'll give it 5 more seconds and I'm going to close it out. So it looks like the top 2 are establishing PM standards and templates and strategic coordination.
Sounds good. Thank you, Katie. And I assume this is from the ones that consistently work with their PMOs. So some of the ones that have said rarely, hopefully some of those standards and templates that we'll talk, or tool sets that we talk about now, will also help you in understanding what there is available out there. So how do you understand the value of project management? Well, for one thing, we want to see that we've improved project visibility from a holistic level. It can help through standards and templates on each one of the individual projects, but improved project visibility across the board is what you're really striving for in a PMO. Let's talk about project scope. Have there been any changes to scope after the project kicked off? If so, they must be well-defined, documented, and approved to ensure that they're not exceeding the timelines or exceeding the resource availability, or providing or requiring additional third-party purchases, additional software, things of that nature. So that's obviously improved visibility on any of those scope changes can help other impacted areas be on board to what might have been a smaller decision. Providing that insight and visibility is just only going to help. Project budget. Are there any risks to the budget? Some of those scope changes could exceed timelines, and if that's so, would exceed potentially service contracts. So providing that visibility up front, especially if it's an approved scope change, which is not bad, those things are absolutely relevant if that is within your strategic alignment and within your overall budgets that you have for that year. But providing that visibility into that obviously is key, and helping people continually assess that would be the PMO structure or the project managers to be able to say, hey, let's take some checks and say, where are you at in this process? What's your cost overruns, or hopefully what you're under? What's your balance at this point? Hopefully that you have a surplus, things of that nature. Obviously timelines. If timelines exceed or you're missing deadlines, maybe it's because of communication, maybe because of any of the different options or issues that can impact timelines come up. How do you improve the visibility of that? So tasking owners and having a PMO office in place to assist in monthly meetings, status meetings, steering committee meetings can only heighten the understanding based on many of the different projects. Usually a PMO manager or VP would have at their disposal, or in their or what they can pull from. And overall project quality and deliverables. You want to create that visibility so that if there's concerns about design decisions, if there's concern about technical specifications, if there's concerns about cost overruns, how do you provide that up the chain, or talk to multiple impacted areas, or maybe an impacted area that wasn't initially brought into the group? How do you quickly identify those type of things? A PMO having oversight over all the different projects can quickly pivot and assess those before they become a bigger risk. Project governance, a lot of the things that are around project governance, talking about oversight. And one of the key things that we want to stress with a PMO is a PMO group is not meant to make things harder for projects. A PMO group is supposed to make things easier and more effective for a project. So providing that training up front, we talked about that, makes things easier downstream. Providing guidance when a major risk or issue comes up. That type of oversight can help make things easier for the project managers. We don't want to implement a project management office or implement a tool set that burdens and makes things more complex. We want to provide each and every piece of the tool set, of the training, to help project managers more effectively manage projects so that they can become more successful. One of the ways to do this is through gate reviews or health checks. A gate review is held at any major phase, like if you're going from design phase and starting into a build phase, or going from the testing phase to ready for go live. There's key metrics or key decisions or key exit and entry criteria for any of these phases that need to be met. So having a PMO always be able to establish the consistency and the guiding principles around each one of those will help each and every one of your projects stay within the guidelines. Health checks can be done at any point in time. Maybe you have a extended design phase, or maybe you have an extended build phase where you need to just quickly do a health check to say, okay, we just need to see where you are at in your timeline, your resources, your RAID logs, are you keeping everything up to date? If not, how can the PMO be of assistance? Is that joining some meetings to help ensure that maybe you have a certain group that's a little bit more vocal during meetings, and it sometimes hinders getting decisions done. So providing even the outside party to be able to come in to help rein in or put things in a parking lot before going down rabbit holes. There's different things that come up in a health check that doesn't have to be around a major gate review that is very effective. And of course, risk mitigation is number one for all project managers, but then risk mitigation as it goes over all the projects and how they can intermingle and cause greater risks for the entire group of projects is where project governance through a PMO can really assist. So let's talk about a model for implementing a project management office. When we come in and we're working with a client, we can do multiple roles, but you can also use this role that was established a long time ago, even back in the old days of PMI. You can have a supportive PMO, a governance PMO, or a directed PMO. A supportive PMO provides support for on-demand expertise, access to information, and expertise on other projects. In other words, your established PMO might have all the tool sets in place. So you have a consulting service come in and say, how can we assist you with a project? It doesn't mean they take over the project. It means they're assisting with the project and working in conjunction. Then you have a governance PMO, a PMO that assumes responsibility for defining and controlling all the methodology standards and templates. This is what we look to partner with resources on to help say, how can we bring in the methodologies tried and true for a lot of major ERP implementations and combine it with your tool set, maybe using your status report or our status report, or combining that in a way that allows us to work together as a group. Or maybe you don't have an existing PMO structure in place, so there's directive. Maybe a consulting group has all of those tools and techniques, so you just absorb that. Or likewise, if you're creating this internally, you can also use these three different techniques. Maybe it's a maturation process of your PMO group itself. Maybe it starts out as supportive and then becomes governance And then effectively, once it's a fully matured organization, gets into the directive PMO, where it's really establishing all the guidelines that have to be followed throughout all the different projects that create that consistency across the board. So one of the things you have to look at is identifying and implementing the resources to align with one of those types of structures. Very important to talk about leadership and oversight. I think a lot of us understand that. If you don't have leadership buy-in on any project, there's going to be challenges, because if throughout the organization they don't understand the change imperative or why you really need to make certain things a priority, then it always becomes a challenge to timelines, budgets, and resources. The implementation project manager, as many of us are, work to manage the detailed tasks of any and sometimes multiple projects, whether it be the plan, the budget, the resources, and deliverables to ensure their expectation or the expectations are met. And then often we introduce working groups and all the other resources that are accountable for individual implementation tasks, whether it be a key design or a technical development or things of that. So combining those structures and understanding throughout your PMO, whether it's supportive in terms of an implementation project manager might support a different project, or whether it's fully directive of all these different resources, just different methods that you can implement. We talk about defining functions, methodologies, and tool. Well, there's a vision for a PMO that needs to be established up front. Is this PMO going to take on one of those three major forms, or does it have a specific goal at your organization? Maybe your organization has an existing PMO, but it hasn't been operating on all cylinders or being able to effectively manage all the different projects through the organization. Maybe that's the next goal. Or if you don't have an existing PMO, maybe it's just to get things started with trying to set some standards for the templates. So setting that vision for any level of the PMO is key. Then obviously communicate and complete training for those involved of the next steps through the process. And then measure the adoption and continue that change management, that feedback loop. When you're growing through that process of supportive all the way to directive, or maybe you don't even want to get to directive if it's not set in the vision, managing and continuing to provide that feedback throughout the process is key. So project management as a partner to the business, we want to be able to provide visibility through different mechanisms. Here we talk about some of the new tools that we have at our disposal, whether it's obviously Microsoft Project and putting in project plan, now with Teams and providing what used to be SharePoint, now even a communication strategy using the chat functions is used all the times on our projects now. And what we've been doing lately is building out a lot of smart sheets, which is a tool set that's out there and available that is kind of like Excel, but it provides a much more graphical view, which sometimes resonates a lot more than a bunch of numbers on a screen, where we are in the progress. We've done timelines based on our drawdown of actionable tests. We've done total tests. We've done tests by modules. We've done PTF testing of automated test cycles. You can do this through development phases where you're tracking how many retrofits have to happen, or if you're doing a new customization, how many new customizations need to be implemented during a timeline. So using that to create percent complete metrics, our capacity planning, what's our trend lines, what are our total resource hours on the project to understand our project budgets and where we're at in the process is key. And this is one of the continuing educations that we can do with all of our customers. And you can do internally to say what will help us take the next step. We've seen where we implement something as simple as a key dashboard like this at a major organization. They're like, wow, all the data that I need to see is right there. Another key fact, I don't know if anybody can see my screen right now, but we also provide these same types of information on a handheld device. So you can see the trend line, you can see the overall completeness, and that's a lot easier for an executive to access than always going to a PC or bringing up an email and seeing something static. These things are on demand and live so that as you go through the process, you have that information in real time. Another way Elire differentiates itself in the consulting process, but you can also do this internally depending on your internal focus and vision, is start to incorporate a lot of the tools into the different applications themselves. What we found is when we bring our Elire Accelerator tool to clients to help manage the process, not only from a project management, but from a PMO perspective, if you have multiple projects going on through your ERP or all the different support systems that feed or get information from your ERP, like data warehouses, things of that nature, you can begin to create these tools inside the applications themselves, so you don't have multiple tool sets people have to learn. Here we have pulled in a lot of our key metrics that we track: requirements traceability, percent complete, again, capacity planning, trends, and resource hours, to help understand how we're better serving the project by keeping the disconnects or pain points visible to everyone. Any of our recommended actions on all the different types of redesign or re-engineer or replacing some type of function or requesting new functionality. All those things come into play as we look at additional tool sets that a PMO can bring to the table and coordinate into training sessions, whether it be internal to a specific application like this, as it was in Oracle's PeopleSoft application, or like a new tool set like Smartsheet to provide overall views with a better reporting dashboard. So some of the key takeaways as we go down to the last few minutes and try to get through some Q&A is, when you define your PMO function, methodologies, tools, you really need to set that vision for what your organization is. We saw from the respondents, some are a little bit further ahead of the curve on the PMO, but you can still continually improve, continually get feedback, and continually take next steps. Likewise, for defining that first set of PMO structure, you really set that vision that's attainable. Just like any project, you don't want to set the bar too far. Setting measurable, attainable goals is key. You want to be able to communicate that not only internally to the project managers, but to the whole company to ensure that the comprehensive training is well understood and provided. And then measure that adoption so that you can continue to progress down the path of a more efficient and more engaging project management office. So with that, we do have a hard stop at in just a minute here. So I wanted to see, there were no questions. So it must be that I was completely answering all your questions as I was going along the way, which I appreciate. But we'll always have time to submit additional questions through the process, and we can get back to you through email or through direct communications through one of our sales associates. So next up, we're going to be talking about improving data analytics and visualization for your organization. Dayton Paul is going to take that over, and at that point, check one more time if there was any Q&A. There was not. I want to say I appreciate everybody's time. Hopefully, it was time well served and a little bit insightful. Shared a little bit of what we see as we look to partner with each one of our clients and some of the lessons learned that we've gained along the way, and hopefully we'll continue to work with you to assess any of your goals going forward. Thank you.